This is part 3 in my After Action Review series on Israel's post-October 7th, 2023 conflicts in Gaza and Lebanon, gathered from interviews with IDF soldiers. Part 1, we covered what went right, the standing advantages, the strategy, and the systems that worked. In part 2, I discussed what went wrong, the standing disadvantages, poor strategies and equipment, as well as information warfare failures. This episode focuses on what the IDF can do to improve, literally the lessons learned, and there are some tips in here for NATO armies as well. If you haven't seen the first video, it's linked below. You can also see the full video at ryanmcbeth.substack.com for paid members. I also have a slideshow there which you can download. Feel free to contact me if you want me to deliver this presentation to your unit. I strongly suggest you watch the first video because it provides context to the Israeli army in general. You know, I did a lot of research for this, and a big help was ground news.
I'm at the airport right now, and I was reading the ground news app, and this thing popped up. U.S. may be forced to close some airspace next week if shutdown continues. Not something I necessarily want to see while I'm at the airport, but the good news is that ground news gives me the ownership, the factuality rating, and whether a publication leans right or left, so I know who is telling me what to think. Favorite part about ground news is this blind spot report right here. So this blind spot report shows you things that you might have missed due to your own personal political biases. For example, right here, White House launches website listing undocumented immigrants who receive Medicaid. 0 outlets on the left covered this news article. Or another good example up here about SNAP benefits. Governor Wes Moore of Maryland released $16 million of state funding for Marylanders to receive SNAP benefits. So news outlets on the left and the center covered the story, but not a single news outlet on the right did. This tool is crucial for me to find stories that I might have missed. So click the link in the description below, hit the QR code up here, or go to ground.news/Ryan to get 40% off the Vantage plan, which is what I read every single day, even in the airport.
So let's talk about what you can do to improve. To start, professionalism and leadership. The IDF needs a professional non-commissioned officer corps, writ large. Israel needs a track for career NCOs with pay, status, schooling, and authority to match. A lot of the minor incidents I personally saw online, from soldiers leaving dunnage on the ground to petty theft of personal property, could have been prevented by a professional non-commissioned officer corps. Now let's talk training. Everything falls back to training. Israeli reservists should train more than 1 month or so every 2 or so years. Israel has security challenges that are unique to their situation, so dropping a NATO or American monthly drill model into their military may not be effective. That being said, one area of improvement could be for more frequent reserve training scattered throughout the calendar year that is of shorter duration. No army should go to war with out-of-date doctrine, and a lot can change in 2 years. If this isn't feasible due to the cost or limited training areas, a second option would be to establish that professional NCO corps and just activate the officers and NCOs more frequently so they can receive updated training and doctrine. Too much of the IDF's culture still idolizes the romantic War of Independence soldier who could improvise with nothing but a rifle and grit. That mindset worked in 1948 because it had to. There was no doubt that the Bacharbi Uvakashti figure-it-out mentality is an advantage to the IDF. This level of innovation places them light years ahead of traditional Arab armies who view initiative as disobedience. But oftentimes, this Bacharbi Uvakashti is a substitute for poor strategy and training. Next, logistics. Currently, Israel's best soldiers go to Unit 8200, and the next best go to combat units. The logistical corps kind of gets whoever is left. A third of Israel's best soldiers should go into sustainment roles. That also means a common, updated individual soldier kit across the reserves. And if you think that's expensive, try losing a war. Modern cargo trucks need to have gun mounts and rain covers. Logistics soldiers also need to know how to perform convoy operations so they're just not learning on the fly. Units also shouldn't fear over-ordering parts because they'll get stuck with the bill after the war. War is wasteful and units should be able to over-order things that they might need. Israel will never be an expeditionary army like the United States, and that's fine for Israel's logistical system to reflect short-range fighting close to home. But Gaza and Lebanon showed that when civilian contracts collapse, the army has to lift itself. That means modernizing convoys, protecting supply lines, training sustainment troops to deliver goods in a contested environment. We got to talk about food. This sounds trivial, but it's really not. Napoleon said an army marches on its stomach. The IDF still relies on tinned food or manat krav, literally war rations. Soldiers call it tuna and crackers. Field rations affect the morale and endurance of the soldier. Israel needs to move toward modern MRE-style meals with flameless heaters and balanced nutrition. These kits exist. They're just not widely fielded. Inconsistent food delivery shouldn't depend on local restaurants or donations from kibbutzim. Feed your army properly. Hungry soldiers make bad decisions. And now for the hardest part, the information war. If there's one thing you take away from this video, I want it to be what I'm about to say. Information war is a weapons effector. During this conflict, social media was used to convince American protesters to glue themselves to the side of a boat in the port of Oakland because they thought the boat was carrying weapons for Israel. Other protesters broke into Israeli-owned businesses and caused damage. This had the same effect as using a weapon system to impede the movement of a cargo vessel or a weapon system to take out a manufacturing facility. Bot networks and sophists need to be identified and targeted as the combatants they are. This could mean cyber effects, or it could mean kinetic effects. If that sounds like I'm putting a Hellfire missile through some edgelord's window, you might have to do that. Information warfare can damage physical infrastructure through protests or convincing sympathizers to perform kinetic actions. Information warfare practitioners encourage or enable this behavior. They are combatants, and they should be treated as such. Do not cede a domain of warfare to the adversary because you don't understand it or you feel that striking these targets is disproportionate. If you have qualms about it, consider it to be a shaping operation which creates the conditions for future decisive actions. You wouldn't hold back on attacking an enemy's data center where they're using cyber attacks, right? So why would you hold back on striking bot farms and disinformation actors who can create kinetic attacks in your own country? Also note that right now, the Israeli Prime Minister is the country's main spokesperson, and that's a mistake. The IDF needs a centralized information strategy that works more like a marketing department. Clear messaging, fast reactions, and tailored communications for different audiences. You can't fight 21st century propaganda with 20th century press releases. Gen Z doesn't trust official briefings. They trust content creators. And when the IDF refuses to release combat footage, the adversary fills that vacuum. If you don't feed the content beast, the adversary will. Israel, and for that matter, NATO, needs pre-planned offensive public relations teams that can push accurate footage, explainer threads, and rebuttals within 2 hours of a false claim. They also need to onboard trusted third-party voices in advance, an amplifier mesh that spreads verified content faster than misinformation. Use sympathetic content creators to your advantage. Invite them to go on patrol. Invite them to record training or allow them to make videos on how different weapons work. Human communication matters. Authentic human communication matters. If your soldiers risk their lives to avoid showing casualties, show it. Not in a ham-fisted way, but allowing designated social media soldiers to tell your story. Visual evidence saves credibility. The IDF, and by extension NATO, must highlight code of conduct enforcement and transparency. Otherwise, the other side decides the narrative for you. Strategy and structure. Strategically, Israel has to break its reliance on reservists. A prudent target might be 4 to 6 or more active duty brigades, which would allow the IDF more depth, rotation capacity, and surge resilience. Currently, Israeli towns are developing rapid response units of trained reservists who have rapid access to military-grade weapons and equipment. This is a good start. Europe, and especially the Balkans, should take note of this for defense against Russia. Modern combat moves fast. That means real-time digital battle tracking, shared situational awareness apps like ATAC or the American Net Warrior system, and the automation of the chain of knowledge. So intelligence and situational awareness flow directly from the squad up and from the command down. This might sound expensive, but so is losing 10 to 20% of your soldiers in friendly fire accidents. Maybe start out with one digital battlefield management kit at the platoon level and kind of go from there. Phones need to be confiscated in combat zones, again, writ large. Now, this might seem like it contradicts my previous suggestion of designating soldiers to record their activity for information warfare, but soldiers with phones should receive a dedicated information warfare and operational training brief. And also, Hamas did not have modern electronic warfare systems that could track and triangulate signals, but modern LISCO adversaries might. So kind of get into that practice now. And finally, make a concerted effort to secure all battlefield communications. The use of encrypted radios was a problem that was fixed early, but in a combat environment, it could be a recipe for disaster. Next, let's talk about op-tempo, or operational tempo. Friction has always been a factor in war, but the IDF's pacing was slowed by civilians on the battlefield. Once ground is taken, it needs to be held, especially when fighting guerrillas. Plans also need to be devised for safe areas where troops can hand out aid and provide security for civilians. Now let's talk about drones. Every single platoon needs to have at least one drone and one drone operator. It looks like the IDF is moving toward that route, but it needs to make sure that this is part of the Army's core training, not performed when the soldier gets to their unit. Medical. Israel's medical care in the field was exceptional, but it can still improve, namely in the area of training personnel. Combat medicine is perishable, and medical units should train periodically to provide tactical combat casualty care. One takeaway for NATO countries is that the Israeli system of delivering whole blood and pushing doctors forward to the company level needs to be studied for integration. Casualty evacuation in the Pacific theater will be stressed, and pushing more advanced medical care at the tactical level will increase patient outcomes. Intelligence. Unit 8200 remains one of the best signals intelligence organizations in the world, but its composition creates blind spots. Separating Unit 8200 into a civilian intelligence agency would dramatically improve oversight, continuity, and analytical diversity. When intelligence officers rotate out after the release from conscription, institutional knowledge just walks away. That's dangerous. Build systems to retain data and insight even after a conscript leaves. On the battlefield, soldiers need secure messaging and mapping tools. If you don't give them one, they will use WhatsApp. And that's a signal intelligence gift to your enemy. Finally, wars are fought by people, not equipment. Israel's greatest strength is V'charbi u'v'kashti, with my sword and bow. This instinct to improvise is part of their DNA. But sometimes the sword and bow need to evolve. Thank you to all my survey respondents for being so patient with me, especially those who proofread my work. Remember, you can view the complete video in its entirety at ryanmcbeth.substack.com. You can also read the white paper I wrote there as well. I have a presentation there for paid members, and I can come to your unit to deliver this presentation. If you want to support the channel, grab my Intel Life t-shirt from Bunker Branding. Thank you so much for watching. Do you have a Christmas party to go to this year and you want to be the coolest guy there? Head on over to bunkerbranding.com. Get my NORAD Christmas sweater. Features a Canadian CF-18 and an American F-22 flying jointly, protecting the skies during Christmas. You will be the coolest person at the Christmas party, and I guarantee you, people who want to talk about fighter jets will come over to you. So head on over to bunkerbranding.com and be that cool guy at the Christmas party.